Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Barely Bookish podcast. Today, we are going to be continuing on with Kindred. So, if you haven't listened to the earlier episodes, please be sure to go back and listen to those first, and then come back and listen to this episode as we go through Kindred. I am joined today by Candace, who's been in the last few episodes. So, I'm sure you all will have a great, good, fun time listening to even more Kindred and talking about this spectacular book. Getting back into the book, back into the
Yeah.
reading, back into our chapter,
Yeah.
we find out that Alice and her husband were caught in 5 days. I don't know, maybe it's just like the romanticizing it, but I thought they would have actually escaped.
Yeah, I was hoping that they would, especially because of her freed status.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that like from what I remember and like reading and things like that, people used to if you found a free person, like if you were a mischievous or uncaring or unfeeling white person, and like to say that is kind of a cop out because most people at this time period were
Mm-hmm.
racist just by nature of the society itself.
Yeah.
Um, the systemic racism absolutely has a source.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's always been a system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like I remember reading, and this like broke my heart, that a lot of freed people, you'd have to be careful and be safe and have like backup copies of your papers, because
Yeah.
if a white person, especially in the South, found you
Mm-hmm.
and didn't believe that you were free or didn't care that you were free, they could rip up your papers and just like sell you. Like they could just like take you and act
Yeah.
like you were their slave, and like nobody would believe what you were saying. No, I'm free, I have papers, whatever. They would just rip your papers up or burn them and then kidnap you essentially. Like that was fine. Like that was okay. So like even being free wasn't necessarily in certain places in this country. Like even being free wasn't safe.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at someone like Alice and like her husband, especially because he's walking around with injuries too. It's not like he, looks like nothing happened to him. Like he's got, you know, he's got, wounds all over his hands from, from beating Rufus up.
Mm-hmm.
She's got a bloody face. Like they're not exactly inconspicuous, you know what I mean, traveling at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it must have been a hellish experience.
Yeah. And like, I also think, how do you even get copies of those papers? Because it's not like they have like copiers.
You have to ask the person who wrote it for you
Mm-hmm.
to write you copies. Like that's how people used to do it. Like a copy was just literally two pieces of paper
Mm-hmm.
that are exactly the same. It wasn't even like you could make, you know what I mean? Like so the person would have to sign like all three of your, your
Mm-hmm.
backups or whatever. So that's what I'm saying. Like it was
And no one's
there,
gonna
there
do
was no way
that.
to win. Yeah, there
Yeah.
was just no way to win. You know what I mean? You're lucky enough that you have the first paper.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Let alone the rest of them. So yeah, really rough. Really, really rough.
Yeah. So Dana wrote a letter to Kevin, obviously, to say that she was home, and Rufus is going to town to send this letter. But
Mm-hmm.
he also secretly is going to purchase Alice. But yeah, he's totally going to send that letter, right, everyone?
Sure
Right?
is.
Totally
Of
going to
course
do
he
that.
is. He's so honorable.
Mm-hmm.
And while he's in town, one of the things that really struck me is like the banter between Nigel and Rufus.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that I think like shocked me the hardest is like Nigel, like when they get into the buggy or whatever to go, like I wrote down like a little note
Mm-hmm.
when they get like when they're getting ready to go, kind of explore, their options to get Alice and to help her out, quote unquote, help her out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's one of the things that they kind of start doing is being playful with one another. Like Nigel like throws like some dirt or some grass or something at Rufus and he catches it and they're laughing and he's like, see, he's taking advantage of my weakened state. And for a minute you get like this flashback to when they were kids and they were like friends, they were best buddies.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so nefarious because deep down inside you know that like they are not friends. This is not a
Yeah.
friendship. There is an extreme like imbalance of power here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where one person has ownership of someone. You can't own somebody, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
not real, but they made it real. So
Mm-hmm.
this person has to be nice. He has to take him there. He has to believe that like either he has to believe that Rufus has, Alice's best interests at heart, or he has to recognize that he is this kind of monster of
Mm-hmm.
a person that's been raised to be awful to other human beings and know that he is the shepherd basically that is like carrying him to his destination to bring Alice home. And like, I can't imagine what that must feel like for Nigel, because he grew up with Alice too. It's not like only Rufus knows Alice.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not even that Nigel even has the choice, because of course if like Nigel says no,
yeah,
one, he'll get beat, and two, Rufus will just go on his own. You know, it doesn't change a single thing. It just puts like Nigel in a worse place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when Rufus brings Alice home, she is unconscious. She's in really, really bad shape, and Dana has to clean her up and try and play doctor. While basically still trying to figure out if, you know, her family line has started on Rufus's current actions, which is horrifying because Alice is also in Rufus's room, and she literally has to be like, yeah, can you just like not while she's healing? And Rufus is like, I would never, blah, blah, blah. But nobody knows that. Nobody knows that because you've already tried. Someone said no, you still tried.
Right. Well, I mean, he even he never answers Dana when she asks him if he did more than try. So I'm willing to believe that he's already put his hands on her, that he could succeed. And I think the thing that like really messed me up too was like when they bring the wagon around, right? And Dana sees her for the first time, and she sees how mangled she is, and she sees, you know, how like ruined she is, right? It's clear that like Rufus at least does care about Alice in some way, because he's like, you know, spare no expense, somebody help her, you know, if you can help her, please, like, let's focus. Like, he's really being very take charge about her care. But again, like, what she wants doesn't matter. Like, she's already said no, and he still insists on putting her in his bed and then sleeping next to her while she heals. Not even giving his bed up, which, like, again, I get it. She's a slave. He's a slave owner, whatever. But, like, if you're somebody who's saying, oh, and if it were 1976, I would marry her, that still isn't enough for him to be nice to her, to be basically considerate. You know what I mean? And, like, I think the other thing that, like, messed me up is like, just the conversation that everybody is having about all of this, right? About how Alice is different, and, you know, like, what he wants out of her, and Sarah's perspective of, you know, well, maybe it won't be as bad for her if she lets him have what he wants. That to me, I think, like, the reactions of the people that are also enslaved on that plantation, like, or in that farmland, right? Like, that chilled me to my bones, like, to my bones, to hear that apathy, because they're just like, there's no getting out, right? Like, a few years ago, Kanye West decided to, like, pop off at the mouth and talk about how slavery must have been a choice for people after a while, right? Because they stayed. And I remember just kind of being enraged by that, because obviously that's the most idiotic thing that, like, he's said yet, really. And he said a lot of whoppers. But, like, there was no choice. It was either a violent and vicious uprising where you murdered everybody on the plantation that wasn't a slave, or you died.
Yeah.
Right? Or you just continue to live this life. Like, that's not really a choice. You know what I mean? Like, deciding that you're going to take the lives of men, women, and children isn't something that these slaves were entering into lightly. And I think that speaks volumes when you think about, you know, the idea of savages, right? How they used to call Black people, you know, enslaved savages, right? But if they were savages, there wouldn't have been slavery for very long, because they would have just killed everybody.
Yeah.
They had to think about what it was going to mean for them to have an uprising and to murder somebody and take a life. They had to think about that. But these slave owners aren't thinking about that at all. And, like, you see that best of all with Sarah. Like, Sarah is this strong and intelligent and extraordinarily capable person, right? She, you know, is the cook, and she's seen as the aunt of the entire farm, right? Like, everybody respects her. And she still points out, you know, that person is lazy. That person's not doing what they need to do. And Dana's like, I don't understand. Like, everybody's in the same boat. And Sarah's like, right, but if they don't do their work, I'm the one who's going to pay for it.
Yeah.
So then it becomes self-preservation. And when you look back at this time period, it's like, you know, you have a woman, you sell off all her kids, she has one remaining kid, she's going to do what you want for the rest of her life. Because she's just really, you just can't sell her last child. Please don't sell my last baby. I'll do whatever you want. Like, they break you. It's like a pattern of of breaking and breaking and breaking and breaking people. And like Alice is somebody who was strong up until this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
She sees her dad, get assaulted. She sees her mom get assaulted when Dana comes the first time. You know that there's probably more incidents like that. You know, he probably died. Somebody probably killed him, right? Or arrested him, sent him downriver or whatever. So this is somebody who already has like been through so much, only to then arrive at this moment where she is free. She has a husband. The two of them try to escape, and they tie her up like an animal and force her to keep up with the horse that she's literally tied to. And when she can't, they beat her and then sell her.
Yeah. And like she literally then gets purchased and lives right next door to her freed home.
Like, I can't. That is something that I have a very hard time processing. I think like this is the longest break I had to take in this book so far. Is like realizing that like Rufus has purchased her, and like they're not even talking to Alice about it. Like Alice is still unconscious, she's still healing, whatever. She has no idea at this point what's going on or what her fate is, but like everybody else knows. Everyone else knows. So for someone like Aunt Sarah, right? For somebody like, I don't know, Nigel, what does that look like to them? This person was born free and is now a slave. What is the point of fighting, right? Like, yeah. I wouldn't fight. I'd be like, maybe I can just be quiet and limp along until the end of my days, and hopefully they won't hurt any of my family. Like that's probably what I would do. I don't know that I would be prepared to kill people for that, because even if you succeed, like Nat Turner, right? Let's say you succeed and you kill everybody, right? Like someone's gonna kill you too. You know what I mean? It's not like it ends there. You know what I mean? Like it's the greatest self-sacrifice ever. Like that one threw me. That one threw me for a loop. That was the moment that I was like, oh man.
The worst part too is you kind of have to like cope with the fact that he obviously doesn't really love her because he knows she was born free, and he will not set her free now that he finally has his nails in there.
Yep, he still does that to her, and he knows what it means. It's not like he's ignorant to it. He knows the gravity of it, because when he's confronted with that truth, when Dana's like, "What did you do?" He was like, "Well, that was the only way I could get her home." Okay, but what are you doing now?
Yeah.
How are you going to fix this? How are you making this right? You say you care about her. Set her free.
Yeah.
She has a house already. It's not going to cost him any money. He's not losing any property. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's just doing this for his own selfish gains. That's it.
He's doing this because then he just basically has full control over her all the time.
Yeah. Yep.
This is like that moment when he brought Alice home. Like, I already knew he had gone into the dark side. That just sealed his fate for me.
Absolutely. And I felt bad for Dana too, because in that moment, like she's seen some little glints of him not being the best person, right? But she's like, she kind of rationalizes it to herself a little bit. Like she's talking about how like, she was really hoping she was going to rub off on him in a good way. But at the same time, earlier in the book, she even says like, I recognize that there's really only so much I can do because of the time period, right? And because of his life, the way he's been raised, like all I can do is hope that my presence can smooth this narrative of my ancestry, right? That's all she can do. That's all she's setting out to do. She's like, I can't change the past. To change the past is to undo my future. To change the past is to possibly make things worse. So all I'm going to do is see if I can just smooth it out. Hopefully I can impact this person in a positive way and he won't be terrible. And this is like the first time that she really has to like reckon with the fact that her impact is increasingly small. Yeah. It's just getting smaller and smaller and smaller on him the longer he lives his life. And I have to tell you, like, at this point in the book, I mean, I know that there's going to be, I know there's even more than this coming up, but like part of me is just like, how does that feel? Like you're stuck in the past. You think it's your job to like make this person better. And then you realize that they're actually just a fucking monster. And you're still stuck in the past. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how is she supposed to reconcile her mission? Like, this whole time, she thought she was being sent on this mission, and we have yet to see that come to fruition at all.
The worst thing, too, is I'm worried that he's going to start going after her, too, at some point. And, like, one, already that's gross, because that's, like, your many times great kid.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And yeah, no. Like, we
Rough.
already got a glimpse at the beginning that he tries to like pull her through and she loses her arm. So
Yep.
we know at some point, like, he's actively doing stuff to get her there.
Right.
We just don't know why yet.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
apparently they cut off Alice's husband's ears because he tried to hit the judge's son.
Mm-hmm.
Again, talking back to the what happens when you rebel.
Yeah.
And then Sarah tells Dana to ask Nigel to see if Rufus actually sent the letter to Kevin. This
Yeah.
is like, I love Sarah for doing this, and two, like, the fact that Dana still fully trusts Rufus to do that
Yeah.
speaks volumes.
Well, again, I think it parallels her relationship with her husband, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's very much someone who accepts the idea of, you know, being treated better than others,
Mm-hmm.
right? Better than other people have been treated. Like, I wouldn't say that she is, you know, someone who's like complicit in that or something like that. I think she just is like, well, that's just what's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
Like with Rufus, she's like, you know, he's mean to, like when he was mean to his mom, she's like, oh, he's so mean to Margaret. He's not mean to me.
Mm-hmm.
We have a bond. So
Yeah.
all this time, I think she's kind of gotten comfortable with the idea that he's like nice to her,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm going to try to get him to be nice to other people.
Yeah.
But like in that moment, when Sarah says that, I put the book down. I was like, girl,
I know. I was like, oh
girl,
no. Oh
oh
no.
no, oh no. Sarah's like, you know, he says whatever he wants, right? You know, he just like acts like he's fine. You know, he's
Mhm.
kind of like almost worse than his dad, right? And you're
Yeah.
just like, hold on, what?
I literally read that and I was like, should I text Candace? I was like,
Oh my god. You got to read it like 3 times, right? You're like,
yeah.
did he send the
I know.
letter?
I
He
was
said he
like,
sent the letter.
all of us readers too are probably like, oh yeah, of course he would. And then Sarah says that and we're like, would he though?
Yeah, yeah. Like it, and that's why I think Butler is such a masterful writer,
Mm-hmm.
because like I've read plenty of first person narrative,
Mm-hmm.
right? Plenty, tons. This was her first novel. Most people's first novels, I think, like a lot of them tend to be first person because it's easier to kind of
Mm-hmm.
write from that one perspective. You can get real stream of consciousness with it in some
Mm-hmm.
cases if you want. But like she does an excellent job putting you right in her shoes, like putting you right in Dana's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I swear to God, like her, because she even says, she's like, wait, what? Did he do it? Oh my God, I have to ask Nigel. The second Sarah said that, and Dana's like,
Yeah.
that was my exact reaction. I went,
Mm-hmm.
oh,
I audibly gasped.
like I don't trust Rufus,
Mm-hmm.
right? I trust Rufus way less than our main character does,
Mm-hmm.
but I still was like, of course he would send the letter. Why wouldn't
Yeah.
he? Of course. What reason could he possibly have to not
Mm-hmm.
post the letter? And like I
Yep.
love that she doesn't even give it away. We don't even have an answer. We just know that maybe he just didn't. That's
Yep.
all we know.
I know. But then when Dana's like, hey Nigel, do you know if he sent the letter? He goes, oh, I don't know. I was on like some sort of task, whatever, when he would have sent the letter. I was like, oh, my man did not send the letter. No way.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, definitely didn't. But like, again, we're like, what is his motivation? Why would he just not send it? It's not like sure, he likes Dana, but I didn't think he liked having her around that much
Right.
until this moment. I was like, oh no.
Yeah. But like, what are his purposes? You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And then the thing that really, like, at the end of that little section, the thing that was the biggest gut punch is him talking about is Alice, not Alice, is Aunt Sarah
Mm-hmm.
talking to Dana about like her husband, right? Oh, your husband's gonna come for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, hopefully he sent the letter. I know he loves you. He doesn't know the difference between black and white. Like that's what Sarah says,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to Dana about Kevin,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what we might think.
Yeah.
And
He's good for the
then she
1800s, not so
right,
great for 1967.
correct.
76. Sorry.
So that was something else that stuck with me, because Aunt Sarah's like, oh, my man wasn't good. Like, my man used to say, whatever, like, he used to, because she asks her, like, oh, do you think Kevin's gonna come back for you?
Mm-hmm.
And Dana's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's hard because that's like the same fucking, that echoes the, yeah, of course he sent the letter. Like, that's the same,
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, ah, at first. But then, like, she talks a little bit. She doesn't say a lot about the men, the men that, like, the guy that fathered her children, or any of that stuff. She doesn't get personal a lot.
Yeah.
With Dana, I feel like in this chapter, she gets the most personal she's ever gotten, over time. So for the first time, you hear Sarah talk about her man, right? She refers to him as my man. She's like, oh, my man didn't do that. And Dana assumes she's talking about Carrie's dad. Oh, and Carrie's father? She's like, no, my eldest son's father. So she then goes on to say that he promised that he would free her, and then said he was going to put it in his will. And she's still there. Like, she's still there. Oh, he used to tell me he loved me, and then he'd be hitting me and beating me up the next second.
Yeah.
And then you find out that, like, Hannah, right? The wife, the first wife of Whalen, right? Of Tom Whalen. That's who fathered her children, or at least her first child. So to me, in just that one, like, teeny paragraph, it's like 5 sentences. We learned so much about her. We learned that, much like, I mean, again, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but like, much like Thomas Jefferson, right? Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. Sally Hemings was actually his wife's sister. Their half sister.
Yeah.
Because Thomas Jefferson's wife, her father used to sleep with Sally Hemings's mother, his slave, right? So this has just been happening for generations, because even she was the product of slavery from his father, from Thomas Jefferson's, like, great father-in-law or whatever. You know what I mean? So I think that's probably where she's drawing this, where Butler is drawing this parallel from, is that relationship, because, like, it would happen like that a lot of times in families, where, like, all of the men would just, like, sleep with their slaves and just not care.
Yeah.
So we know that Tom Whalen's father-in-law, right, was the kind of man that felt comfortable, like, doing this kind of thing, right? And, like, making this promise and, like, never coming correct, right? Never, coming through with that. And then he sold all of her children except for Carrie, which means he sold his wife's half brothers and sisters. Like, that is like some fresh hell I can't understand.
Yeah.
Like, that is some next level psychoses. And then because she specifies my oldest child's father, I'm like, so how many other people, how many other times has this happened to her?
Yeah.
Did it happen with Tom Whalen? Like,
probably.
Who else has this woman had to put up with? So, like, we're all sitting here worried about Alice, right? With Rufus, Alice with this one man. And then this other woman, this older woman comes, right? She's got probably 15, 20 years on Alice, and acknowledges that, like, that was only the first time it happened to her.
The worst part, too, is Dana literally pointed out that a bunch of the kids look like Tom Whalen.
Yeah, she did. There's all kinds of kids all over the farm that look like him, from different women. Can you imagine having children and thinking, oh, great, I have more slaves. Oh, great, I have more people that I can sell off. I have more currency. I'm richer.
Yeah.
Because I have raped multiple women and forced them to have my children.
I also...
And now that they're attached to the children, I'm going to sell them because it's going to make me more money.
The weird thing, too, is Dana literally talked about how a lot of the kids looked more like Tom Whalen than Rufus did.
Yep. Because he looks like his mom with that red hair.
Yeah.
Out of control.
I just can't imagine. Like, I can't even imagine thinking that way.
To me, it's interesting to me that, like, America doesn't want or doesn't try to do more to acknowledge all of this, because it's pretty obvious that this was poison. It's pretty obvious that this entire system it hurts everybody, and not just Black people. You know what I mean? It also kept white people down. The reason that all these like poorer white people like Tom Whalen, right, who isn't like a rich fancy guy who has like Monticello or whatever, like he's not wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
He's just a guy that has enough money for some slaves, right?
Yeah.
So he's a farmer. So like that's how deep this runs. Like this isn't even like we're talking about a rich man. We're talking about somebody who is trying to get by on the status quo, and the way he does that is by having slaves, right?
Yeah.
So like I'm just like it just boggles my mind that like America doesn't do, like the government especially doesn't work harder to like make reparations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do something to honor this atrocity
Mm-hmm.
that happened on our soil. Like we still have Confederate soldiers that were fighting to keep slavery alive and well and to keep raping people, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have people like that like in national monuments, right? So like when you think about that, like George Washington was like that. George Washington was like, yeah, don't worry, slaves, I'm going to free you, and then never freed them. He swore up and down he was going to free him in his will, and he didn't. You see what I'm saying? And that's our founding father. And like, I love my country. You know, I'm proud of the fact that we no longer have slavery. I'm not proud of how long it took.
Yeah.
I'm not proud of how long people were just standing around talking about it, and we're like, yeah, eventually we're going to do something, and then they like did it in the worst possible way ever, just letting people go with no trade, no skill, no credit, no references, no money, no clothes. Like all they had was exactly what they had right now at that moment. Get the fuck out. You know what I mean? Like that's or stay here and just quietly still be a slave, and I'm going to pay you like
3 pennies,
a penny a day. You know what I'm saying? To continue on, right? So I feel like it's shocking to me that more hasn't been done to like address all of this, and that people don't know. Because to me, when you can talk about something, right, even just as a personal trauma, when you can talk about your personal trauma without being triggered, without like going right back to that moment, without feeling bad about something and how something happened, right? That's how you know you're over it. But when you can't talk about it, when you keep it under your hat, that's when you know that like you still need more time. You really got to do some work, and you got to face this thing that happened to you, for better or for worse, right? So what does that mean, that we're always trying to sweep it under the rug?
Yeah.
And undereducate people on it. You know what I mean? It just rubs me the wrong way. And like reading this was so evocative of that. Like just seeing how like this woman, we're thinking one time she had a bad time, but no, it was the first time.
Yeah.
Like that's fucked up.
I will say too, though, it doesn't surprise me that our country is, because we have a lot of things we need to work on. Like we are still at a point where like we can't even make sure that there's like equal housing opportunities. Like the minimum wage was still a big fight, and we just started working on it like this past year. It's like, as a country, we have so far to go, and everyone's like, oh no, we're fine, we're doing great.
Yep. But I mean, again, like I think that the ability to grow and the ability to like the fact that we can and do have like systems in place to hopefully assist people, right? And the fact that we have reform, I think that all of those things could ladder up to mean a better future for everyone, right? For everyone involved. But I also think that that's something that's a little bit of an impossibility because people don't want to admit where they come from. For example, right? Like generational wealth. The people who used to pick cotton, right, were slaves. The people who owned them got rich off of them picking all that cotton. So flash forward to today, if you have somebody that is a billionaire, right, and they're a billionaire because they have this amazing cotton that they sell, and they've been farming cotton in their family for generations, right? Those people owe a debt to society because their fair hands never had to pick the cotton, okay? Maybe in the 1900s, late 1800s, they started paying people to pick the cotton. But before that, right, when they were making all their money and they were like buying Senate seats and they were rubbing elbows with Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, they were slave owners. And now those people who picked that cotton, their descendants have nothing. And these other people's descendants have millions, if not billions of dollars from all of the work that other people have done historically, right? So it's like people are like, oh, well, that shouldn't matter. You know, they've made their money already. And it's like, well, yeah, but also no. They've made their money off of the backs of people and the blood and the sweat and the tears and the loss and the misery and the abject humiliation and trauma and terror of other people.
It's like I was watching that show, that Bravo show, where I think it's like Southern Charm, you know, and two of the families in there, they're like, we've like, our families have like always lived in Charleston for whatever and ever, and they're generationally wealthy. And I'm like,
What are the implications?
yeah, and everyone's not
Yeah,
talking about it. And I'm like, ha ha, do you know where your money comes from?
yeah, that's blood money.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't think that there's anything wrong with identifying that and looking
Hmm.
at that, like taking a hard look at that, right?
Hmm.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person in 2021. You have nothing to do with
Hmm.
what happened in 1862 or 1775 or whatever, right? Whatever
Hmm.
time it was. Like, that's not your battle.
Hmm.
But the money that they have is soaked in blood.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, a charitable donation, right, to let's say an HBCU,
Hmm.
um, giving to the ACLU, helping the Last Prisoner Project, helping, the NAACP, right?
Hmm.
Even let's say there's somebody, maybe you have a local school establishing, a scholarship where you send 5 Black kids to school, to college for free every year if they
Hmm.
maintain a GPA of 3.0, whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
That's going to do more good with that money that you owe someone else, right?
Yeah.
So, like, why not?
And also, I feel like at this point, you have more money than God. Like, you have
Yeah.
more money than you
And
can
you'll ever
ever spend in
spend.
your lifetime.
Yep.
Your kids, like, you get to that point where you have so much money that, like, even if your kid and your kid's kid never works, like, they'll be set for life. Like,
Correct.
at that point, I would be like giving half of my money to charity
Yeah.
because that's like, I don't need it. Like,
Yeah.
I could just give some of this money to like a hedge fund investor, earn it all back tomorrow. Like,
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, especially because charitable giving
mhm.
begets more money,
Yeah.
especially because it makes you look like you really give a shit, makes you look
Hmm.
like you care, even if you don't. Like, it makes you look like you're a rock star, right? Like, I'm so nice, I'm donating my money, whatever, right? So why not just be on the right side of history?
Right.
Instead, there's silence.
Hmm.
Even now, like, the conversation about reparations is taking place very, very quietly. And some cities and states have actually already started kind of taking steps. Like, I know Illinois, I think it's been on their docket. There are specific cities like throughout the Midwest that have thought about it.
Hmm.
Tulsa, obviously, they need to pay their Black people, a ton of money for like the Tulsa race massacre, in the early 1900s. Like, there's a
Hmm.
lot of work that needs to be done, right?
Hmm.
But then people are like, well, if we do the work, that's admitting that it was a problem. And it's like, you don't
Yeah.
have to admit that this was a problem. I think we all know it was a problem, and
Yeah.
that's why we don't talk about it,
Literally.
you know?
And I think the thing that always bothers me about that conversation too is like you kind of said, where they're like, well, I didn't do this, but like, once again, this is a systematic problem,
Yes.
and by starting to break the cycle and being like, hey, I will give scholarships to kids or whatever, like family is in need or whatever, like, that starts the process so that those kids, when they grow up, can have more money than their parents did.
Yep. A little more equality and a little more generational wealth. That's
Yeah.
it. Because it has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And we're looking at, like, this book is basically kind of, I mean, obviously it's not a specific treatise on this, but, you know, this is absolutely, like, this is a woman who is staring down the barrel of her heredity, right? Of her ancestors and the people that she comes from,
Mhm.
and having to kind of take stock and understand that she is the result of oppression. Like,
Mhm.
her life only exists because of oppression. Even me, I'm a fairly fair skinned
Mhm.
Black woman. My last name is McAfee. It's an Irish last name. Did I get that way because somebody fell in love and things were so romantic and the world was a really nice, happy, shiny place? Probably not.
Mhm.
No, no. It was because somebody decided to kidnap my people a long time ago, and now I look like this and have this last name. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
can't, like, hate who I am or whatever. I can look at myself and appreciate how I look and how I am, and the opportunities that I have for the future, and I can look toward the future. But it's not like I don't carry that with me. When people want to ask me, "Oh, that's an interesting last name. Where is it from?" and I have to be like, "Slavery." That's
Yeah.
not a great, you know what I mean? Like, it's an awkward conversation to have.
Mhm.
But there are so many people who are just not aware. I was in a meeting and someone commented on how this woman's last name was a strong English name,
Mhm.
and she was a dark-skinned Black woman, and I
Mhm.
was just like, before you talk about how she has this English name and I wonder if she's from London, You
Mm-hmm.
should probably instead recognize that she has a bachelor's degree in African American studies
Yeah.
and therefore is probably not British and instead is just somebody who accepts her history. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
I think that was the most eye-opening thing I learned in high school is why the last name Williams is so common in Black people.
hmm
And I was like, "Oh, thanks for
yeah,
that." Like, I'm glad a teacher was like, "Hey, fun fact," because no one would have told me about that. No one would have taught me that until I like come across someone that knew that or read about it.
yeah,
But it's like that's horrifying because that kind of like really throws into scope how widespread this was,
yeah.
like that basically Alice could have been anyone.
Anyone. She is anyone.
Mhm.
I actually think that's kind of the point.
Mhm.
Like, I don't want, I'm not going to, speak to how things are going to turn out because we're trying to like read this a little bit at a time so that
Mhm.
we can, pace ourselves and chat.
Yeah.
But I really think I think we're going to find that that's the reason that this journey exists,
Mhm.
to recognize that like this is a shared experience with so many people. And I think it speaks volumes that like you have a whole portion of society for
Mhm.
whom this reality is an everyday thing,
Mhm.
right? Like, I'm not going to say that I wake up in the morning and I'm like, slavery on the brain. No, but like,
Yeah.
there are times when it comes up
Mhm.
and it's been hundreds and hundreds of years and I don't know anything. You know what I mean? Like, all I know is what I read, whatever. Like,
Mhm.
I wasn't there.
Yeah.
So then you have this person go back in time and witness all of this and recognize like this affected everybody. And it's really unfortunate to recognize that you have an entire population of America for whom this is an all the time kind of realization,
Mhm.
and then a whole other swath of people for whom they never talk about this, they never think about it, they never, question it, they don't want to talk about it now, they're doing everything they can to bury this, being taught in schools.
Mhm.
And it's like because you don't want people to know where your money comes from.
Yeah. This kind of like is reminiscent of the fact that one time someone asked me if I could go back to any point in history where I'd want to go back to. And I literally was like,
It's a hard question for me.
well, the thing for me is like the furthest back I want to go is the 80s. That
Yeah.
because and that is the only time I would feel a like crumb of safety being a
Yep.
woman alone.
Yep.
Like and I couldn't imagine like I already well one I have white privilege, so but I'm still a woman
Yeah.
alone. And it's like
Yeah.
you ask that question like so many people could not be safe if they go any time past the 80s. Like
Yeah.
70s, sure, but like 1970 is your cutoff. Like at that point, any further back, so many people would be unsafe. Like the only person that can be like, oh, the 50s might be cool is a white man.
So I mean, I've had that very same conversation,
Hmm.
right? And it's difficult because I've even found myself saying, "Oh, I was born in the wrong time period. I
Hmm.
wish I'd been born in this other time." Because it's hard for me to reconcile these amazing like milestones in time, right?
Hmm.
So I'm like, man, the 20s was amazing because of the Harlem Renaissance, but the 20s also saw a huge flight of African American people
Hmm.
to Europe because they weren't allowed to pretty much do anything here, right? Even
Hmm.
Louis Armstrong, one of the greatest musicians of all time, used to have to use the back door when he would go perform at a white club. Like that was
Yeah.
his reality, which is why he used to perform a lot in Paris. You see Ella Fitzgerald, right? All these, notable Billie Holiday, all these notable African American, visionaries
Hmm.
and icons that found more success overseas. You know what I mean? Even
Hmm.
Nella Larson, there's a new movie called Passing that just came out. She wrote that, I'm pretty sure, in Denmark. Her character like moves away and everything like that.
Hmm.
So it's interesting to be like, oh yeah, I want to go back to that time because it would be cool. But then like, where would I be, right? Or when I was, I used to dance burlesque.
Hmm.
I was like, oh yeah, man, the 50s and 60s, that was a great time. But then I'm like, oh, but if I actually went back to the 50s and 60s, I wouldn't be dancing burlesque in a club,
Hmm.
you know, filled with all different kinds of patrons. Like if I wanted to go dance burlesque today, I'd, have all kinds of people watching me.
Hmm.
I would either be at a rally or a march trying to march for my freedom,
Yeah.
or I would probably be working for somebody. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be like it's not like all of a sudden, I'm just exempt to the rules of the time period.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard. It's really hard because I love the influence of those time periods. I love like mid-century modern furniture,
Mm-hmm.
like watching Mad Men was like a feast for my senses. But again, like those black women weren't equal.
Yeah.
Even working in the same office, even working for these people, they were still put upon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely crazy, and it's wild to be reading this and recognize how little things have changed, while
Yeah.
having to be thankful for how much they've changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Long tangent, sorry.
No, it's fine. That's what we're here for. That's honestly the reason people come to the Barely Bookish podcast. Because if they wanted to actually hear about the story, they just read an audiobook. Listen
There
to an
you go.
audiobook.
That is true.
You come to the commentary. So, Alice is starting to wake up. Her memory is not there. She doesn't remember who Dana is. She doesn't know why she's here. But she's just kind of like, she's so, what is that called? She's like turned into herself so much that she's like reverted to almost being a child again,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is terrifying.
Also her head injuries, I think, too,
Mm-hmm.
because like she basically almost got trampled by that horse trying to run behind it.
Yeah, and she also got like ripped apart by a dog and everything too. Like she's got some serious PTSD going on.
Tons.
So, this happens for a couple pages, and then Alice starts to remember, and she's like, where's my husband? What's going on? Why am I here? What's happened? And Dana has to grab her before she makes a scene and basically like hold her hostage and like shush her so that she doesn't raise the alarm and like become a notice.
Yep.
So also at the same time, Carrie and Nigel are having their child. So Sarah is out and Dana's having to cook while this is all happening. And of course, like Dana can't really help Alice because if she doesn't cook, then Sarah's gonna get beat.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's just a lot happening right now. And then Alice is like pissed that Dana didn't say anything and didn't let her die. And she's also convinced that like Rufus snitched, which I don't blame Alice at all. I would be convinced of the exact same thing. We have no reason to trust Rufus at all.
That's true.
Um,
That kills me though when Alice is like looking at Dana and asking her what's it like to be a slave.
yeah.
And she doesn't know that she's a slave.
Yeah.
That wrecked me in a big way, man. That got me in my soul. And like again, like that's what I'm saying about this writing is so masterful because like that's what Dana's feeling. Like that's what she's feeling because Alice is like, oh yeah, my mom always said I'm going to marry a free man. I should have married a free man. My mama had these big dreams for me. She's trying to plan a future. She's talking about what's next for her. She's talking about her life. She's like hoping and dreaming, and she has all these aspirations, only to then find out, just kidding, you're a slave.
I was tearing up reading this part. It was really rough.
Murdered me.
Yeah.
Murdered me. Gut punch. Couldn't, like, even now talking about it, like I mean, I can't imagine that. Like, you wake up from a major injury. You don't really know where you are for half of it. And then someone tells you, oh, by the way, your body is no longer your own. And you can't go wherever you want. And you can't go back to your house. And you can never go back to this life you've lived for 20 years.
Yeah.
Your life is just gone. Because you loved someone. Like, it's... And I think the thing that really was gross, too, is that, like, even when Dana's talking to Rufus is like, well, hopefully she won't remember. That's enough for him, her not remembering.
Yeah.
We can go back to the way it was before. It's been so good. And Dana's like, this is good to you?
Yeah. She's literally a child right now.
He's like, well, she hasn't hated me. So not hating him is good enough for him.
Yeah.
Hatred is where he draws the line. If she hates me, then that sucks. But, like, we know that doesn't stop him.
I know.
I
just want to know what happened in those 5 years that Kevin was raising Rufus, essentially.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's a lot that happened there, and it's adjusted Rufus into now being more like Tom.
See, to me, like that's that's the mistake
Mm-hmm.
right there, right? I personally think that if Kevin had stayed,
Mm-hmm.
Rufus might have been a better person,
Yeah.
right? Because Margaret has her babies and she goes crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like even that like guiding force of like being at least halfway decent so his mom won't like get in his ass,
Mm-hmm.
like even that's gone. Like, and we know that Tom ignores the hell out of his son.
Mm-hmm.
So in trying to avoid being like him, of course he becomes just like him, if not worse, because he has no guiding light.
Mm-hmm.
Because Kevin leaves, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm sure Kevin wasn't like, "Oh, I'm gonna leave here and you know
Mm-hmm.
fuck everything." I'm sure that wasn't like. I'm sure he wasn't being malicious,
Mm-hmm.
but he clearly didn't think through whether or not he should stay.
Yeah. I
Clearly didn't think through.
I don't know. I'm very curious about what happened in this 5 year, whatever it was, gap, because obviously something happened to drive Kevin away. And all that we have is the result that Rufus is more like his father than ever. So
Yep.
something happened. We don't know yet. And I have a lot of questions about that gap period.
Same.
Because it's obviously not good. Then we get the kind of reveal that apparently Tom told Rufus that he wanted Rufus to use Dana instead of Alice. And I was like, that is disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, for multiple reasons, not even being that she literally saw Rufus when he was like 5.
He's not thinking that though.
Yeah, I guess they're close in age now, but like, ew. Still ew.
Yep. Super disgusting.
Yeah.
I also think that like the thinly veiled result, right,
Mm-hmm.
of Isaac running away too kind of comes up,
Mm-hmm.
where they're talking about how like they cut his ears off and now he's trying to like heal from the beating he took,
Mm-hmm.
and how they're selling him like literally down the river, like they're selling him down the Mississippi,
Mm-hmm.
which everybody knows is like the further south you get, the worse
Mm-hmm.
you're treated, and that's like just known. And like I feel like because of that, Tom and Rufus feel like, oh, it's not that bad
Yeah.
to be with us, which I think is part of the reason why it's so easy for them to just kind of imagine that they could own Dana, because
Mm-hmm.
Dana so far has been accommodating compared to others. Like those other slaves do what they need to do, right? These enslaved people do what they need to do because they are terrified
Mm-hmm.
for a variety of reasons, right? But Dana's not like Dana doesn't do things out of fear for the
Mm-hmm.
most part. Even when she needs to, like, our last chapter where she's like teaching, young Nigel how to read. Like
Yeah.
she needed to be afraid and she wasn't. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So she's fearless. And I don't know like what Tom Whalen thinks is gonna come of that if he does take Dana instead of Alice. Like, you know what I mean? Like is he prepared to break her? Because again,
Yeah.
like Alice is a fighter, but she's not Dana. She's not as
Yeah.
she doesn't know what Dana knows.
Also, like, Tom literally saw her teleport away in front of his eyeballs. Like, how does that not strike fear into your heart?
Yep. Yep, I agree.
So then we find out it's been a month since Dana wrote the letter, and I was like, okay, there's no way Rufus sent it at this point, because we don't even have like a message back from Kevin or anything. So then Tom finds out about this letter, and he is not happy
At all.
at all. And basically requires Rufus to send it. And he's like, yeah, my dad's like, your words, your bond, or whatever, but he says I shouldn't have promised it to you.
Yep.
Which, like, I guess it's good that Tom's a man of his word, but like, then he also says you shouldn't have promised.
Yeah.
Which this whole
Yeah,
situation,
because they used to do that all the time. Oh,
yeah,
don't promise. But again, that's in contrast
mm-hmm.
to the way that like Tom's father-in-law was. Tom's father-in-law used to promise shit all the time,
Mm-hmm.
namely to Sarah,
Yeah,
and didn't come through. So it is interesting to me as a character trait
Mm-hmm.
that Tom Whalen cares that much. Like he's okay with lying.
Yeah.
Because he's like, if you don't promise, you don't have to deliver, right? He's fine with like leaving out the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's fine with lying by omission. That's fine for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell people whatever you want, but never promise. Because you promised, you have to go and send this letter now.
Yeah.
Like, that's a very thin line.
Mm-hmm. At least it's a line, which is all we can hope for.
I mean, compared to Rufus, yeah, at least there's a line.
Yeah.
Like, that's wild to me. Like, that we're starting to see all the ways that his dad is, like, a more upstanding man than he is, even though we're thinking that this whole time this person's a nightmare.
Yeah.
That does not bode well for anybody on this farm.
Yep. And then we get to the moment where Rufus tells Dana he wants her to convince Alice to be with him.
Out of control.
Like, one, why is why is Dana your wingman situation right now?
Listen.
And then also Rufus basically is like, listen, I would like her to come of her own accord, but it doesn't matter if she doesn't come of her own accord. Like, he's just gonna make it happen. Like, what's even the point?
He basically is like, she can come quietly, or I'm gonna get her.
Yeah.
She can either come now because she understands this is the way it's gonna work,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna be peaceful, and she's gonna let me love her,
Mm-hmm.
which, like, clearly this is anything but love. Or I'm gonna come for her.
Mm-hmm.
That's like someone going, hey, so there's a bully outside. They said they're just going to come in here and like rip you out of your chair in the middle of class if you don't go outside.
Yeah.
You'd be like, I'm not going outside. No bully's going to come in here for me.
Yeah.
But like for this lady, he could absolutely come for her
Mm-hmm.
and be within his rights because she's now his slave.
Yep.
Like, that's fucked up. Even Tom, he admits it. He's like, oh, well, it was a waste of time healing her. You're just going to have to whip her sick again to get what you want from her. What?
And the worst part
How
is
that
like,
the conversation?
Tom knows this is all happening. And
Yeah.
he's just like, whatever. Like,
well, because to him, this is just life. This is normal. That's what you do. That's what you do with these women. That's what you do.
Talking about this book is so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the thing that's the craziest for me is that, like, all of this is actual, like, is pulled from actual
Mm-hmm.
history. Like, this actually happened to people. And that's what I think is really interesting about, like, the combination. Like, we talked about this a little bit last time, but, like, the combination of historical fiction and sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have this, sci-fi is like this whole realm of possibility, right? What could happen? The unknown,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's based in science for the most part, right? What
Mm-hmm.
could happen, because science is all about hypotheses and all that stuff. But it's definitely not supposed to be grounded in real life
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, right? Other than, like, maybe the location. But then it's also historical fiction. So the fiction part here is who it is happening to, not what is happening. You know what I'm saying? What is happening is the historical part. And to me, it's again, like, I've studied this on my own in my life. So it's not surprising, but it never gets, I'm never jaded by it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been learning about slavery and systemic racism and all of that stuff my whole life, and it never gets any easier. You never just, like, open the book and start reading and you're like, it's fine. Mm-hmm. I've read this book twice before and can't remember how it ends because it's a lot.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's some space in my mind that could be held for other things than obsessing over how ridiculous things used to be, mm-hmm. and kind of still are, right? So, I don't know, it's amazing and it's unforgettable, but the details are hard to hold on to because they're very harsh truths about, mm-hmm. an entire time, multiple centuries in our country's history.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I wish, like, that this was required reading.
Me too.
You know?
Skip The Color Purple, man. It's not getting you anywhere.
Yeah.
That's Alice Walker's weakest book.
I had to read that as a kid too.
Yeah.
And I only remember, like, the fact that the main character got raped. That's all I remember about that book.
Yeah.
Because it horrified me. Because, you know, here's the thing too, is that in high school they don't put trigger warnings about things like that. You know, and that's not something I was prepared for going in, having mm-hmm. only read, you know, like, YA fantasy.
Sure.
Like, Warrior Cats was my book. And then I went from Warrior Cats to like normal YA dystopian to then having to read The Color Purple, and no one prepared me for that.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like most teachers aren't even really prepared to teach it,
Mm-hmm.
especially because, like, again, like, you can't have, it's hard to separate a person's work,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it is historical fiction, because that is definitely historical fiction, right? It takes place in the past.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard to extract a person from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, Night by Elie Wiesel, right? Clearly, that is, autobiographical, so a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Or like The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, right? Any book that's like about the Holocaust, it's going to be extremely hard for anybody
Mm-hmm.
to separate, the Holocaust, like the reality of the Holocaust and the
Mm-hmm.
reality of the people who are descendants of those who had to deal with that and struggled through that,
Mm-hmm.
and the story, right? So if you don't teach anybody about the Holocaust, but then you read The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, or you don't teach the Holocaust at all, you don't talk about it in your history books,
Mm-hmm.
you just leave it alone, and then you read Boy in the Striped Pajamas,
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to make sense to anybody. Like, you're not going to be able to really get all of the symbolism. You can get some of the more obvious pieces of symbolism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Systemic inequity, whatever. This kid is, his innocence is taken from him, right? You can get those base understandings
Mm-hmm.
from it. But without an actual understanding of what happened and what transpired and when it happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who was there? I mean, even X-Men #1 has a whole scene devoted to Eric Lensher's experience, right?
Yeah.
During the Holocaust. So if you don't know anything about the Holocaust, you're going to watch the X-Men movie and be like, you know what I mean? I have no context for this. I don't understand. But because the Holocaust is taught in schools, anybody can watch X-Men and go, oh man, that was a really terrible time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize Magneto comes from that beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can understand it. You can bridge that gap. But with something like The Bluest Eye or The Color Purple, if you're not teaching slavery and you're not teaching civil rights and you're not teaching Jim Crow
Mm-hmm.
and you're not teaching, all the, like, the antebellum South, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before all of this, all that progress, in quotation marks, before all of that happened, right? If you're not teaching any of those integral parts of what Black Americans have gone through
Mm-hmm.
to become seen as even slightly more equal in this country, right? Then you can't possibly understand The Color Purple.
Yeah.
You can't possibly understand The Bluest Eye. All you can understand is, like, I remember I was in a class one time and this girl was talking about The Bluest Eye and she's like, well, because like in The Bluest Eye, she just like wanted to be white so bad. And I'm like, that's not the story.
Yeah.
The story is she feels ugly because the world tells her that she is,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not that she's taking it upon herself to try to be beautiful
Mm-hmm.
because that's what she thinks beauty is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't look in the mirror at my curly hair and go, ugh, like,
Yeah.
wish it was straight because straight hair is just so superior. No,
Mm-hmm.
I can do so much more with my hair. You can do so much more with your hair than a straight haired person, right? You've got
Mm-hmm.
beautiful curls in your hair. Like, you can wear it curly, straight, up, down,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, grow short, long. Like, you're not saying that because you feel that way. That comes
Mm-hmm.
from somewhere. Society is telling you
Yeah.
your hair is frizzy or too big or too nappy or whatever. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, other people are informing that. You don't feel that way just on your own. So I think it's hard to, even have like equality with authors and who we're reading instead
Mm-hmm.
of reading, Huck Finn for the millionth time. You know what I'm saying? Or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, instead, like, reading something that's actually going to affirm your understanding of the world and hopefully expand it, right?
Well, it's like also too, remember, I was not getting, any sort of American history when that book was
Right.
given to me. I just was like handed The Color Purple and they're like, write a 40-page paper about this book. And I was like, this is horrifying. Why did you give this
Especially
to
because
me?
the book is so short. The book is like barely 40
I
pages itself.
know.
Like, that's crazy.
Exactly the problem.
That's
And I
nuts.
was like, this is scary. Please take this away from me. I don't want it.
Yeah.
And my teacher was like, do it. And
Yeah.
I was like, I don't understand anything that's happening right now. Thank you.
Yeah, because that's what I'm saying. You had no context.
I was like a sophomore in high school too. Like, who gives? They're like, hey, I know you haven't learned anything about the world that you live in. Good luck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Required reading.
Yeah.
It's got to be diverse, and people know this movie, so you know what I mean?
Well,
Especially because, again, like, that's one of her weaker
Mhm.
books. I mean, it's a great book. Don't get me wrong. It's a great book. The movie is also really good.
Yeah.
Right? I haven't seen the musical. I heard the musical is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's won all kinds of awards. But again, like, you have to have context. You
Mm-hmm.
have to understand what's going on, because if you don't, like, you're just lost,
Yeah.
and it's a waste of everybody's time. Oh yeah, diversity for diversity's sake, instead of actually trying to learn and educate yourself and occupy, what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
educate your students, help them figure out, the kind of people they want to be, help them not make the same mistakes that have been made in the
It's
past,
like the
whatever.
thing too is that the teacher was actually like a black woman who was like getting her PhD in like textbook writing, like English
Hmm.
PhD. So it's like
Hmm.
she could have done so much about like being like, hey, my students, this is why we're doing this. Or like she also made us read The Kite Runner, which also
Hmm.
horrified me because
Yeah.
again, a very brutal rape scene in that too.
Yeah.
And I didn't know why I was reading that. Again, is
Yeah.
I think I was either a freshman or sophomore, so like freshly out of like middle school. And I
Yeah.
was like, could you at least give some context of why we're reading this? And she didn't. And it was,
I just wonder if she was even allowed.
I don't
Because again,
know.
like, you're going to school in Florida,
Yeah.
and we know that Florida doesn't have the best track record of, of fair and equal
Hmm.
representation. I actually think that Florida used to teach that, like, weird revisionist Southern history for a while, like
Really?
at least the Panhandle, where, like, there wasn't really a Civil War anyway, so let's not talk about it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like
I
the
didn't get
fact that
any
you're,
Civil War stuff
I mean, the
either.
fact that you went through an entire life of education in
Hmm.
Florida school systems, and you had to still educate yourself about American history,
Hmm.
like, that tells you everything you need to
Well,
know.
it's like, I,
So I'm sure that lady was like, well, this is a book that you can read, and this
yeah.
is a way that I can, like, assert how I feel
Hmm.
and my belief systems, to hopefully, like, get some of you to, like, do some of your own research,
Yeah.
because I do have friends that that were challenged, especially in northern Florida and
Hmm.
central Florida, challenged, like, even up to like 10 years ago, with their curriculum and what they were or were not allowed to say, what they were or were not allowed to teach. And, like, you will get in trouble and you can lose your job if people
Yeah.
feel like you're saying something that they don't, that parents don't agree with or whatever, So
Maybe that's what was
it might
going
not have even
on.
been on the curriculum.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I could not figure out what was happening. I just remember like hating that teacher because she would assign like the longest papers possible
Yeah,
about that.
that's trash.
Yeah.
The length of the
The
paper is
worst part
ridiculous,
too
especially for
is
kids.
she made us print it. Okay.
Oh my God.
Yeah. We can't submit anything online. We were in high school. So we had to print like 50 pages and I had to pre-plan printing them because you can't just print 50 pages.
No, you've got to, like, make sure you have paper and ink
Mhm.
and no one else in your
And you
house is
can't
using a
print at
printer.
school. And like
Yeah,
one, is that not like a little bit of a privilege that you even have a
absolutely.
printer at your house?
Absolutely. I don't have a printer and I'm an adult
I
woman.
don't have a printer either. Like
Yeah, I have to go to FedEx Kinko's if I need a
I
printer.
know. And like and it was ridiculous. And also I found out that she didn't even read it because I had a friend who only turned in 20 pages versus my 45. We got the
Hmm.
same grade.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah. Cuz I like she also had us turn in these giant papers towards like the end of the year. And it's like, yeah, you didn't plan that very well when you're also working on your doctorate, Miss Lady.
No.
Be-
Because it's busy work.
yeah, it is. It was
Hmm.
ridiculous. Like, I don't know. I wish this would have been assigned versus the color purple because this at least would have allowed me to feel something with the main character because I have a basis of understanding her from
Yeah.
her modern day perspective. And then she like she takes your hand and leads you through this journey with her. Whereas
Yeah.
the other books I didn't have anything to understand because again I wasn't taught American history. I didn't know what
Yeah.
was going on. No one told me anything.
Right.
So
And I
yeah.
think that, like, it's a lot to expect kids under the age of 18 to just educate themselves, right? It
Yeah.
has to come from somewhere. Someone has to have that conversation. And I think that, a book like this, and again, like, a testament to Butler, because this isn't a long book. I
Mm.
mean, what is this, like, just over 200 pages, I think, maybe
It's got to be
three.
close to it.
264.
Okay.
264 pages, right?
Mhm.
That's not crazy by any stretch of the imagination. The average book, I'd say, is probably like more like 350, if not more, for the average novel.
Mhm.
So, like, this is a relatively short book. And even if you're coming into this without any prior knowledge of all of these historical events,
Mhm.
she packs so much information into such a small amount of text. Like, she's very purposeful and very thoughtful with her writing. You know what I mean? Because she wants to make sure that the reader can understand. And there's so much humanity in this book as well. Like, all of these characters feel like real people. They feel like they exist in the world. You know what I mean? And I think that that's, like, a huge credit to her and her writing, like her writing style. She's just she's very evocative.
Mhm.
in her writing. You know what I mean? For better or for worse. Like whether she's depicting something that's amazing and fun and cute and exciting, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
All the way down to things that are hard to swallow.
Yeah.
And I like that she gives the information in a way where if you already know the information, you go, oh yeah, that's fucking right. Oh no.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know the information, you're like, what? This is my first time reading it.
Yeah.
Oh my God. You know what I mean? So it's not like it's, it's not even like she's, because like people like Anne Rice and Stephen King, they get like really deep in the weeds with their exposition,
Yeah.
just pages and pages of nonsense. Like, and they're great writers, but you don't always need that. But this lady is like, here is one paragraph that sums up exactly why this person is feeling the way that they're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
with some examples of historical figures that also experience the same thing. So anyway, and then she moves on.
And she like name drops things so that you can
Yeah.
also do further reading. Like
Yep.
there's a lot of things that even in this call I learned about, like not just today, but like through this whole source of reading that I had never heard of before. Because again, I'm just now starting to do my life research of things that happened in American history, because that's what you got to do as an adult. You have to reteach yourself. So a lot of this stuff is like things I've heard because of social media has talked about it, or like things I've heard because in passing someone's mentioned it. So it's like, I like that she even just kind of things that you should know about, like being an American citizen, you should know about these things. She still gives you, like, she said, like, Nate Turner and things like that. And she's like, and she gives you like a small summary of what they are doing right now. She's like, one day they'll become this person who does this. So it doesn't feel like Octavia Butler judges people for not knowing things that they should. And I like that because I feel like a lot of literature too, it's like, it's hard coming to the reality already that I don't know that much that I should know. So it's like, and it's worse when I'm reading things and they're like, you should already know this. Like, I know I should already know this, but please don't talk down to me about it, because I'm trying, I'm doing that like research now. So I like, that's one thing I really have to give props to Octavia Butler for her never feeling like I'm being talked down to while I'm reading. Like, it's beautiful.
And I think part of that too comes from the fact that like you're young, right? You're younger than I am anyway. And I think sometimes like people are tired of having the same conversations over and over again. And like, I'm not one of those people that are like, it's not my job to explain racism to you. Like, I'm not that person, because I know that I have the ability to have a calm and purposeful conversation about it. But like, not everybody is. And sometimes like, I think when people, write things where they're like, you should know this or whatever, right? And they get real judgy. It's because they're like, oh, it's 2021 and everybody should already know this stuff. But like, there are still people who don't even really understand anything about like Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr. Like, so you can find me on a variety of platforms like Instagram and YouTube at Candace the Magnificent, all one word. That's Candace with an A. And then you can also find me on the Dungeon Jedi Masters Theater podcast called Scattered Choices. You can find that on Spotify or Apple iTunes, wherever it is that you get your pods from. That is a short series Star Wars 5e Dungeons and Dragons campaign that sounds more like a radio show. You can also find me on YouTube or Twitch at Valor Studios, Valore, like lore, like stories and storytelling, in a game called Deadlands, which is a Weird West themed role-playing game. But yeah, if you want to just find me myself, definitely go to YouTube. I've got cute ice cream videos up there if you're into that kind of thing.
I'm always into ice cream.
Always, right? That's why I was like, this is a safe option to like base some videos on, because everyone likes that.
I mean, honestly, craving it kind of right now.
Yeah, me too.
All right. All right, but we'll catch you all next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the Barely Bookish podcast. If you want even more content, please consider joining the Patreon. It's all donation based, so for as low as $3 a month, you can get access to exclusive episodes, early access to content. You get to join the Patreon only Discord, which is fun. But yeah, you get a lot of cool features. And this month, over on Friday, we will have a brand new exclusive episode, which is our Pride and Premeditation episode with Bethany from Prince Kai Fan Pod. So that'll be a whole lot of fun. Also, I've been doing even more writing sprints over on Twitch. So if you want to hear me and hang out with me and get some writing done, please consider joining me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/barelybookish. But I will see you guys next week with even more Kindred. Our logo was designed by my little sibling Sarah. Our theme song was by Raphael Crux. I'll see you all later. Bye!